Turning 70 once felt like a distant milestone, until suddenly it's here. And despite everything you've heard, nothing truly prepares you for it. No one tells you about the unexpected shifts, the mix of freedom and invisibility, wisdom and uncertainty. But what if 70 isn't what they make it out to be? What if this decade holds more power, joy, and self-discovery than any before? By the end of this, you'll see 70 in a whole new way, surprising, challenging, and entirely yours to shape. Let's dive in. 1. You stop caring what people think. And it's liberating. For decades, Eleanor lived by unspoken rules about how to look, how to behave, how to be acceptable in the eyes of others. She worried about appearances, about approval, about whether she was saying or doing the right thing. It had become second nature, this constant self-editing, this quiet need to be seen as appropriate. But after turning 70, something shifted. One morning, standing in front of her closet, she hesitated over a vibrant dress, one she loved but never wore because it felt too much, too bold, too youthful, too noticeable. She almost put it back, but then a question surfaced in her mind. Who am I still dressing for? Who am I trying to impress? She thought about it. The people whose opinions she once tiptoed around? Many of them weren't even in her life anymore. The pressure to fit in, to be approved of, to be just right. Where was it coming from? The realization hit her hard. She had spent a lifetime worrying about what others thought, and most of them had never been paying that much attention to begin with. So she put on the dress, and when she walked out the door, something remarkable happened. Nothing. No one gasped. No one whispered. No one stopped her to say she had made a terrible mistake. Instead, she felt lighter, freer, more herself than she had in years. It turns out, one of the greatest gifts of this age is the freedom to finally live for yourself. You stop editing your words to keep others comfortable. You stop shrinking to fit roles you've long outgrown. You realize that the approval you once sought no longer holds the power it once did. And in that space, where worry used to live, you find something extraordinary: ease. The ease of showing up as you are. The ease of making choices based on what you love, not what others expect. The ease of knowing that at this stage, the only opinion that truly matters is your own. 2. Your body changes in ways. No one mentions, everyone warns you about wrinkles and gray hair, but no one prepares you for the other changes, the ones that sneak up on you quietly, reshaping the way you move, rest, and feel in your own skin. Eleanor first noticed it when she bumped her arm lightly against the counter. The next day, a deep purple bruise appeared. That never used to happen, she thought. Then came the nights of tossing and turning, struggling to find a position that felt right. And the shoes, oh, the shoes. The ones she had loved for years suddenly felt like torture devices, her feet demanding comfort over style in a way they never had before. At first, frustration set in. She felt betrayed by her own body, wondering why things that once seemed so simple, sleeping, dressing, walking, now required extra thought. But then she shifted her perspective. Maybe my body isn't failing me, she realized. Maybe it's just asking me to listen. So she did. She swapped out stiff, scratchy fabrics for softer, gentler ones. She stopped forcing herself into uncomfortable shoes just because they looked good, and instead chose ones that made her feet feel supported. She began stretching in the mornings, loosening joints that had grown stiff overnight. And when sleep became elusive, she experimented. Earlier dinners, a warm bath before bed, softer lighting in the evening, and little by little, everything changed. The aches weren't gone, but they were manageable. The sleepless nights became less frequent. And most importantly, she stopped seeing her body as a problem to fix and started treating it as a lifelong companion that deserved care, patience, and kindness. Aging doesn't have to feel like a battle. Sometimes the secret isn't in fighting the changes, it's in working with them. 3. You become invisible. But only if you let yourself be. One day, Eleanor walked into a store and felt something shift. The sales clerk smiled warmly at the young woman ahead of her, engaging in pleasant conversation. But when Eleanor stepped forward, the energy changed. The smile faded, the enthusiasm dulled, and she was met with polite indifference. It wasn't overt rudeness, but it was clear. She had become unseen. At first, it stung. She had spent her life being noticed, whether as a mother, a colleague, or simply a woman who moved through the world with purpose. But now, it was as if she had faded into the background, as if turning 70 had made her less relevant. She left the store feeling small, questioning if this was just the way things were now. But as she reflected on that moment, she had a realization. Did she have to accept it? Was this invisibility an inevitable part of aging? Or was it something she had unconsciously allowed? That's when she made a decision. She would not disappear. She started small. She made a point to stand tall, to meet people's eyes when she spoke, to ensure her presence was acknowledged. She stopped dressing in a way that allowed her to blend in, and instead wore what made her feel vibrant, confident, alive. She spoke up in conversations rather than waiting to be invited in. And little by little, she noticed something remarkable. The more she carried herself like she mattered, the more the world responded in kind. Because here's the truth. Society may try to overlook older women, but we don't have to make it easy for them. We don't have to shrink, to fade, to accept being ignored. And when we refuse to disappear, when we walk into a room as if we belong, because we do, the world has no choice but to take notice. 4th, friendships shift, and that's okay. At 70, Eleanor began to see friendships in a new light. Some relationships that once felt essential began to fade, not because of a falling out, but because life had taken them in different directions. Friends she once bonded with over raising kids or navigating careers now felt like distant memories. Their conversations filled with polite updates rather than deep connection. At first, this unsettled her. She had always believed that lifelong friendships should last forever. But then she realized something. Some friendships are meant for a season, and that's okay. As she let go of relationships that no longer felt fulfilling, she made space for something better. She started investing more in the friendships that still felt like home, the ones where conversations flowed easily, where laughter came effortlessly, where she could be fully herself without pretense. These were the friends who saw her, not just as she once was, but as she is now. The hardest part? Recognizing when to walk away. There were friendships that, while built on history, no longer brought her joy. Some felt one-sided, others drained her energy, and a few had become more about obligation than connection. It took courage, but she learned that letting go of those friendships didn't mean erasing the past. It simply meant honoring where she was now. And the reward? A circle of friendships that felt lighter, deeper, and more meaningful. At this stage, relationships aren't about how long you've known someone, but about how they make you feel when you're together. Because friendship in your 70s isn't about clinging to the past. It's about choosing who brings warmth, laughter, and genuine connection into your life today. 5. Grief becomes a frequent visitor. No one tells you how deeply loss will shape this decade. By 70, you've likely said goodbye to people who once felt permanent, some expected, others sudden. You learn that grief isn't just an event. It becomes woven into your life, appearing in ways you never anticipated. Eleanor didn't think grief would still hit this hard, but it did. It wasn't just the big moments, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. It was the small things, the scent of a familiar cologne, a favorite song playing in a store, the empty chair at the dinner table. Some days she felt fine. Other days, a simple reminder brought a wave of emotion so strong it took her breath away. At first, she resisted it. She told herself to be strong, to keep moving forward. But over time, she realized grief wasn't something to get over. It wasn't a sign of weakness. It was proof of love. The deeper the love, the longer it stays with you. So instead of fighting it, she embraced it. She spoke their names, shared their stories, found ways to honor them in her daily life. A meal cooked the way they used to, a tradition carried forward, a quiet moment to reflect. And in doing so, she learned something profound. Grief doesn't mean stopping. It means carrying love forward. Because grief isn't just about loss. It's about the love that never fades. And the more she let herself feel that love, the more she realized that those she had lost were never really gone. They were still with her, in memories, in lessons, in the way she continued living. 6. Happiness becomes simpler. When Eleanor was younger, happiness felt like a moving target, tied to accomplishments, milestones, and the approval of others. A promotion, a perfect home, a number on the scale, a certain type of success. There was always something else to chase, something just out of reach. But at 70, everything shifted. Happiness no longer felt like something she had to earn. It was something she had to notice. It was in the little things, the warmth of her morning coffee, the sound of birds outside her window, the way sunlight streamed through her curtains. It was in the feeling of soft sheets at night, the laughter of an old friend, the satisfaction of a day well spent. She started paying attention. She slowed down. She stopped waiting for happiness to arrive in some grand, life-changing moment and realized it had been here all along. The most unexpected part? It wasn't just about what she gained. It was also about what she let go of. The need for perfection. The pressure to meet expectations. The idea that she had to constantly do in order to be happy. Instead, she allowed herself to just be. And in doing so, she discovered that happiness was never about chasing. It was about feeling. And the more she let herself feel, the more abundant it became. 7. Confidence comes from owning your story. For years, Eleanor held her stories close. She minimized them, thinking they weren't special or worth sharing. She avoided talking about herself too much, convinced that her experiences weren't as interesting as those of others. But then something changed. She started noticing the way people listened when she spoke about the things she had lived through, the challenges she had faced, the lessons she had learned, the moments that had shaped her. She saw the way younger women leaned in, eager to hear how she navigated struggles they now faced. And she realized her life mattered, not just in the quiet ways she had always known, but in the stories she carried. So she stopped shrinking them. She stopped second-guessing whether she was worthy of speaking up. She started sharing more about the things that broke her and the things that healed her, about mistakes and victories, about love and loss and everything in between. And with every story she owned, she felt a little taller, a little steadier, a little more herself. Because confidence at this stage isn't about proving anything. It isn't about validation from the outside world. It's about standing in your own truth and saying, "This is who I am. This is what I've lived." And it matters. And the more she embraced that truth, the more powerful she became. 8. You appreciate your own company more than ever. At 70, Eleanor discovered something unexpected. She actually enjoyed her own company. She no longer feared being alone. Instead, she embraced it. She took herself out to lunch, traveled solo, sat in silence without needing distraction. And instead of loneliness, she found peace. Because by this stage, you realize your own company is one of the greatest gifts you'll ever have. 9. You let go of the past. For real, this time. For years, Eleanor carried old regrets like a heavy suitcase. But at 70, she finally set it down. She forgave herself for the mistakes she made. She stopped replaying what ifs. And she chose to focus on now. Because the past can't be changed, but the way we carry it can. 10. You worry less about time and use it better. When Eleanor turned 70, she stopped saying, "I don't have time for that." Because suddenly she did. She made time for what mattered: joy, creativity, laughter. And in doing so, she realized time wasn't something to fear. It was something to savor. 11. You become who you were always meant to be. Without the weight of expectation, without the constant need to prove something, without the pressure to fit into roles that no longer serve her. At 70, Eleanor finally felt like herself. She laughed louder. She wore colors that made her feel alive, without worrying if they were too bold or too young. She spoke her mind, not out of defiance, but because she no longer felt the need to hold back. For decades, she had shaped herself around others' needs: family, work, society. But now, she had space to ask herself, who am I really? And the answer? She was free. Free to say no, free to say yes, free to live in a way that felt true to her. At this stage, you realize you don't have to meet anyone else's expectations. You get to be you, fully, unapologetically, and joyfully. 12. The best years aren't behind you. They're right here. No one tells you this, but it's true. The best years aren't necessarily the ones already lived. For so long, Eleanor thought the most exciting moments were in the past. Her youth, her career, raising her family. She had been conditioned to believe that 70 meant slowing down, stepping aside, becoming less. But then, she stopped looking backward and started living now. And what she found? More joy, more love, more freedom than she had ever imagined. She discovered new interests, made new connections, tried things she never thought she would. And in doing so, she realized that life didn't shrink at 70. It expanded in ways she had never expected. Because life doesn't end at 70. In many ways, it's just beginning. And there you have it. 12 things they don't tell you about turning 70. Which one surprised you the most? Let's talk in the comments. And if this resonated with you, share it. Because the more we embrace this stage of life, the more we remind each other. 70 isn't an ending. It's a whole new beginning.